My beloved brothers and sisters, many people fear being alone because they think loneliness means weakness. They believe strength comes from people staying, supporting, and choosing them. But Islam teaches us a deeper truth. When your happiness depends on others, your peace is always at risk. The moment people leave, change, or disappoint you, your heart begins to shake. Allah never created you to be emotionally dependent on creation. He created you to stand firm with Him. When you learn to be happy alone, you stop begging for attention, approval, or reassurance. You become steady, calm, and unbreakable, not because life is easy, but because your heart is anchored in Allah. This is the stage where nothing can destroy you. When you are content in solitude and complete with Allah, people cannot manipulate you, loss cannot collapse you, and fear no longer controls you. Happiness alone is not isolation, it is power, dignity, and freedom. Happiness that depends on people is always fragile. Happiness that depends on people is fragile because people are not constant. They change, they leave, they get distracted, and sometimes they disappoint without intending to. When your joy is tied to how others treat you, your heart becomes unstable. One kind word lifts you, one cold moment breaks you. Islam teaches us that this kind of emotional dependence is dangerous for the soul. Allah did not create your heart to be controlled by the moods, choices, or availability of others. When happiness depends on people, peace becomes temporary. You are calm only when things go your way. The moment they don't, anxiety takes over. This constant emotional rise and fall is exhausting. True peace comes when your happiness is rooted in something stable, and only Allah is truly stable. When the believer understands this, they begin to protect their heart from unnecessary pain by changing the source of their happiness. When happiness depends on people, fear becomes part of daily life. You fear losing them, disappointing them, or being replaced. This fear slowly controls your behavior. You may stay silent when hurt, agree when uncomfortable, or overgive just to keep someone close. Islam teaches us dignity, not fear. Allah wants His servants confident, not emotionally hostage. Happiness built on people forces you to live cautiously, always adjusting yourself to avoid loss. Over time, this erodes self-respect. The heart becomes tired from constantly trying to maintain connection. Allah never intended relationships to be places of fear. When happiness is rooted in Allah, fear weakens. You can love people without being terrified of losing them. This freedom brings calm and emotional balance that fragile happiness can never offer. Depending on people for happiness also places unrealistic expectations on them. No human can consistently meet all emotional needs. Islam reminds us that humans are limited, imperfect, and distracted. When we expect people to complete us, we set ourselves up for disappointment. Every unmet expectation feels like betrayal, even when no harm was intended. This creates unnecessary tension and resentment. Happiness that depends on people makes relationships heavy. They feel like responsibilities instead of blessings. Allah never designed relationships to carry the weight of your peace. He designed them to complement a heart already connected to Him. When happiness comes from Allah, relationships feel lighter. People add joy instead of determining it. This shift protects the heart from repeated emotional wounds. When people become the source of happiness, their absence feels unbearable. Loneliness becomes frightening rather than peaceful. Islam teaches us that solitude can be a gift, not a punishment. But when happiness depends on others, being alone feels like failure. The believer may rush into unhealthy connections just to avoid feeling empty. This leads to attachment without wisdom. Allah wants His servants choosing relationships from strength, not desperation. Happiness rooted in Allah allows you to be alone without feeling broken. You become comfortable with yourself and with Allah's presence. This comfort removes panic from loneliness. Fragile happiness cannot survive solitude, but true contentment grows in it. Happiness that depends on people is also easily manipulated. When someone knows your peace depends on them, they may control you consciously or unconsciously. They may withdraw affection to gain power or give attention only when it benefits them. Islam teaches us to protect our hearts from being controlled by creation. Allah alone deserves that level of influence. When happiness is rooted in Allah, no one can threaten your peace by leaving or changing. You remain steady. The steadiness is strength. It allows you to walk away from disrespect calmly because your happiness is not at risk. Fragile happiness keeps you trapped. Faith-based happiness sets you free. Another danger of people-dependent happiness is constant overthinking. You replay conversations, analyze tone, and worry about what others think. The mind becomes noisy because peace is uncertain. Islam teaches us tranquility through trust in Allah. When happiness is rooted in Him, the mind rests. You stop obsessing over approval. Approval from people becomes optional, not essential. This quiets the heart. A quiet heart thinks clearly, worships sincerely, and lives calmly. Fragile happiness keeps the mind busy. Faith-based happiness brings mental rest. When happiness depends on people, gratitude weakens. You focus on what others are not giving instead of what Allah already has given. This focus breeds dissatisfaction. Islam teaches gratitude as a path to peace. Gratitude grows when happiness is anchored in Allah because His blessings are constant even when people fail. Gratitude stabilizes emotions. It reminds the believer that goodness exists beyond relationships. Fragile happiness blinds the heart to blessings. Stable happiness reveals them. People-dependent happiness also affects faith. When relationships go wrong, the believer may feel lost, angry, or distant from Allah. Islam teaches us that Allah should remain the anchor in all seasons. When happiness is rooted in Allah, hardship brings you closer to Him, not further away. This closeness strengthens Iman. Strong Iman produces calm. Fragile happiness collapses under pressure. Faith-based happiness holds firm. Happiness that depends on people often delays personal growth. The believer may avoid change to keep others comfortable. They may stay small to remain accepted. Islam encourages growth, courage, and self-respect. When happiness is rooted in Allah, growth becomes easier. You move forward even if others don't understand. This forward movement builds confidence. Confidence strengthens peace. Fragile happiness resists change. Strong happiness welcomes it. Relationships also become healthier when happiness is not dependent on them. There is less pressure, less fear, and more sincerity. Islam values balanced relationships. Balance exists only when neither person carries the other's emotional weight. When happiness is rooted in Allah, love becomes choice, not need. Choice is stronger than need. Fragile happiness clings. Stable happiness connects freely. Depending on people for happiness also increases disappointment. People will forget, fail, and fall short. Allah never forgets. When happiness is rooted in Allah, disappointment hurts less because the heart has a deeper source of peace. This does not remove pain, but it prevents collapse. Islam does not promise pain-free lives, but it promises supported hearts. Supported hearts recover quickly. Happiness rooted in Allah builds emotional independence. Independence does not mean isolation, it means strength. You can love deeply without losing yourself. Islam teaches this balance beautifully. Fragile happiness demands reassurance. Strong happiness offers calm presence. People feel safer around someone who is whole, not needy. Allah grants dignity to those who rely on Him. Over time, the believer realizes that happiness tied to people was always unstable. Stability came only when the heart turned fully toward Allah. This realization brings relief. The believer stops blaming others for their pain and starts protecting their peace. Protection is wisdom. Wisdom is beloved to Allah. He increases peace in hearts that choose Him as their source. When happiness is rooted in Allah, loss does not destroy you, change does not terrify you, rejection does not define you. Islam teaches us that this strength is possible for every believer. Fragile happiness keeps you vulnerable. Allah-centered happiness makes you resilient. In the end, happiness that depends on people is always fragile because people are temporary, but happiness rooted in Allah is strong, steady, and lasting. When the believer understands this, their heart finally rests. They love without fear, live without panic, and trust without hesitation. And that is the kind of happiness nothing in this world can break. being happy alone strengthens your faith. Being happy alone strengthens your faith because it teaches your heart where true stability comes from. When happiness depends on people, faith becomes fragile, rising and falling with human behavior. Islam teaches us that faith should be anchored in Allah, not in creation. When you learn to be content alone, you discover that Allah is enough for your emotional needs. This realization is powerful. It removes fear of abandonment and replaces it with trust. Trust strengthens Iman. A believer who is happy alone is not constantly searching for reassurance from people. Instead, they turn inward and upward. They find comfort in prayer, remembrance, and reflection. This comfort builds a personal relationship with Allah that does not depend on circumstances. Being happy alone does not mean rejecting companionship. It means not needing it to feel complete. That independence allows faith to grow quietly and deeply, untouched by people's approval or rejection. When you are happy alone, your worship becomes more sincere. Islam teaches us that sincerity is at the heart of faith. In solitude, actions are not performed for praise or validation. They are done purely for Allah. This purity strengthens Iman. Prayer becomes more focused because the mind is not distracted by emotional noise. Dua becomes more honest because there is no one else to rely on. Being happy alone removes performance from faith. You pray because you want closeness with Allah, not because you feel emotionally desperate. This type of worship builds a strong spiritual foundation. A believer who worships sincerely in solitude develops resilience. Their faith does not weaken when people leave because it was never built on people. It was built on Allah. This kind of faith remains steady through change. Being happy alone also teaches patience, which is a pillar of faith. When you are content without constant company, you learn to sit with yourself calmly. Islam teaches patience as calm endurance with trust. Solitude trains this patience. You learn to wait without panic and hope without desperation. This waiting strengthens Iman because it proves trust in Allah's timing. A believer who is happy alone does not rush into relationships or decisions out of fear. They wait with confidence, knowing Allah has not forgotten them. This confidence is faith in action. Faith that is practiced in solitude becomes strong and unshakable. Allah loves hearts that trust Him quietly without complaint. Being happy alone nurtures that trust. When you are happy alone, your reliance on Allah increases naturally. Islam teaches tawakkul, complete reliance on Allah. Reliance grows when alternatives are removed. In solitude, there is no one else to lean on emotionally. The believer turns to Allah for comfort, guidance, and reassurance. This turning strengthens faith. Each answered dua, each moment of peace in prayer confirms Allah's presence. Over time, the heart becomes familiar with Allah's support. Familiarity builds confidence. Confidence strengthens Iman. A believer who experiences Allah's help in solitude knows that faith is not theoretical, it is lived. This lived faith becomes strong and personal. Being happy alone also reduces people pleasing, which weakens faith. Islam teaches us to seek Allah's pleasure above all else. When happiness depends on people, pleasing them becomes a priority. This often leads to compromise and inner conflict. Being happy alone removes that pressure. You are free to live according to faith rather than fear. This freedom strengthens Iman because actions align with belief. When belief and action align, the heart feels peaceful. Peace is a sign of strong faith. Allah places peace in hearts that prioritize Him. Solitude helps the believer reorder priorities. Allah returns to the center. Everything else becomes secondary. This order strengthens faith deeply. When you are happy alone, your identity becomes clearer. Islam teaches that identity should be rooted in being a servant of Allah. When happiness depends on people, identity becomes confused. You may define yourself by roles, relationships, or approval. Solitude removes these labels. The believer reconnects with their true identity as a servant of Allah. This reconnection strengthens Iman. Knowing who you are before Allah brings confidence and humility at the same time. Confidence removes insecurity. Humility removes arrogance. This balance is the foundation of strong faith.